An 11-year-old girl, a copper pot, and one swing that cracked a deputy's skull. The sheriff drew his gun on 5 orphans in the middle of the street. "You going to shoot me, Sheriff?" The 13-year-old boy took a step forward. "Then shoot. But you'll have to explain to this whole town why you put a bullet in a child who was just protecting his family." This is the story of 5 children who lost it everything and fought an entire county to stay together. Before we begin, drop a like if you love stories about family and survival. Subscribe if you are new here, and comment below where are you watching from right now. I love seeing how far this story travels. It all started 6 months earlier on the morning Danny Sullivan woke up to find his father packing a bag. The night Daniel Sullivan turned 13, he learned that copper could break bone just as easy as it could make biscuits. The sound rang out across the dirt street of Willow Creek like a church bell announcing the end of everything. Deputy Frank Miller's skull made a wet hollow crack when Mama's copper pot connected, and the man dropped face first into Wyoming dust without so much as a grunt. Blood spread dark and thick beneath his head, pooling in the grooves his fingers had scraped, trying to break his fall. Danny stood there with his fists still clenched, knuckles split and bleeding from where he'd landed 3 solid punches to Miller's jaw. His chest heaved, his vision tunneled. Behind him, his 8-year-old sister Grace screamed into her hands, while 5-year-old Owen pressed his palms over his ears and squeezed his eyes shut so tight his whole face trembled. 3-year-old Ruby wailed from where Emma held her, the sound cutting through the chaos like a knife through canvas. Sheriff Wade Hutchins stood 10 feet away, with his revolver drawn, the barrel shaking in his weathered hand. The man's face had gone purple with rage, veins standing out thick on his neck and temples. His deputy lay unconscious between them, maybe dying, maybe already dead. The copper pot rolled in a slow circle near Miller's boots, catching lamplight from the saloon windows, still carrying the dent from Mama's years of cooking, and now carrying something else entirely. Danny's heart hammered against his ribs. The metallic taste of fear filled his mouth, mixed with the coppery tang of blood from where he'd bitten his own tongue. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Emma's breath came in short, panicked gasps beside him, and he could feel her terror like heat from a stove. But when he spoke, his voice came out steady and cold as February water. "You going to shoot me, Sheriff?" Hutchins' gun hand trembled harder. The crowd that had gathered kept their distance, townspeople pressing back against storefronts and posts, eyes wide in the lamplight. Nobody moved to help. Nobody ever did. Ever. "You just assaulted a peace officer," Hutchins said, and his voice cracked on the last word. "I can shoot you where you stand and call it justice." "Then shoot." Danny took one step forward. The gun barrel wavered. "But my sisters and brothers are going to run while you do it. And you'll have to explain to this whole town why you put a bullet in a 13-year-old boy who was just protecting his family." Emma's small hand gripped the back of Danny's shirt. He could feel her fingers twisted in the fabric, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that had started spinning. Grace had stopped screaming, but her breathing came harsh and ragged. Owen still hadn't opened his eyes. Ruby's crying had faded to confused whimpers. The sheriff's eyes darted to the watching crowd, faces in windows, men standing in saloon doorways with drinks forgotten in their hands, women clutching shawls tight around their shoulders. All of them seeing, all of them witnessing. Hutchins was good at a lot of things, but murdering children in front of witnesses wasn't one of them. His gun hand lowered an inch, then another. "This isn't over," Hutchins said, but the words came out weak and thin. "You're wanted now, all of you. I'll have every lawman in the territory hunting you down." Danny didn't answer. He just grabbed Owen's hand and started backing away, pulling Emma with him. Grace followed on instinct, her hand clutching Ruby from Emma's arms. They moved as one unit, 5 children joined by terror and blood and something deeper than either. The crowd parted for them like water around stones. They made it to the alley between the general store and the smithy before Hutchins' voice rang out again. "Run all you want, boy. There's nowhere you can hide that I won't find you." A gunshot cracked the air. Danny flinched but kept moving, pulling his family deeper into shadow. The bullet hadn't been aimed at them, just fired into the sky as a warning, or maybe just to save face. It didn't matter. They were running now, boots pounding dirt, lungs burning, running like rabbits from wolves that would never stop hunting. The darkness swallowed them whole. Behind them, Willow Creek erupted in shouts and chaos. Ahead lay nothing but wilderness in the slim, desperate hope that somewhere out there was a place that might take them in. Danny's split knuckles burned. His heart felt like it might explode. But he kept running, because that's what you did when you were 13 years old with 4 younger siblings depending on you to keep them alive. The copper pot lay forgotten in the street, blood drying dark on its battered surface. Tomorrow someone would pick it up and wonder whose it was. But tonight it had done its job. Tonight it had bought them time to run. That was 6 months after Mama died. 3 months after Papa sold them for $50 and a cleared bar tab. 3 hours before they would learn that sometimes the hardest part of survival isn't the running, it's the stopping. But that came later. First came the memory of how they'd gotten here, and that story started on a morning when Daniel Sullivan woke to find his father packing a bag and his whole world starting to crack apart at the seams. The sun hadn't even risen yet when Danny opened his eyes that day 6 months back. Something was wrong. He could feel it in the air, thick and heavy, like the pressure before a storm. The house was too quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of early morning, but the loaded silence of secrets being kept and choices being made without asking permission. He found William Sullivan in the kitchen stuffing clothes into a canvas bag by candlelight. His father's hands moved quick and guilty, and he didn't look up when Danny stepped through the doorway. "Where are you going, Pa?" William's hands froze on a folded shirt. For a long moment, he just stood there, shoulders hunched, still not turning around. When he finally spoke, his voice came out hollow and defeated. "I can't do this anymore, boy." Danny's stomach dropped. "Can't do what?" "This." William gestured vaguely at the house, at the sleeping children in the other rooms, at everything and nothing. 5 kids, no money, debts piling up higher than haystacks. Your mama's been gone 3 months, and I still can't breathe without thinking about her. I can't. "So you're leaving." The words came out flat. Not a question, a statement of fact, cold and hard as iron. "It's not like that." "Then what's it like, Pa? Because it looks like you're running away." William finally turned around. His face had aged 10 years in 3 months, deep lines carved around his mouth, and eyes gray, threading thick through his hair. But there was something else there too. Something that made Danny's chest go tight and his hands curl into fists. Guilt. And underneath that, relief. "I did something," William said. "Something to help you kids." "What did you do?" "I talked to Sheriff Hutchins." The words came out fast, like he needed to get them out before he choked on them. "Told him I couldn't care for you proper anymore. Told him the state should take you, find you good homes, places where you'd be fed and clothed and looked after right." The world tilted. Danny grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself. "You told him what?" "It's for the best, Danny, you'll see. Hutchins said there's families who want children, good Christian folks who can provide in ways I just can't anymore. He's coming tomorrow to collect you and your siblings, take you to the orphanage in Helena until placements can be found." "Placements?" Danny's voice came out strangled. "You mean like livestock? Like cattle being sold at auction?" "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" Danny's voice rose loud enough that he heard Emma stir in the other room. He forced it back down to a harsh whisper. "What's it like, Pa? Because it sounds like you're getting rid of us. Sounds like we're too much trouble, so you're just giving up." William's face crumpled. "I got $50, and Hutchins said he'd talk to Malloyd at the saloon about my tab there. Clean slate. I can start fresh somewhere, maybe Montana or Colorado, find work where people don't know me and don't look at me with pity every time they pass by me." The truth hit Danny like a fist to the gut. "You sold us." "That's not, I wouldn't." "You sold your children for $50 and a bar tab." The words came out cold and precise, each one deliberate as a nail being hammered. "Mama's been dead 3 months. 3 months, Pa, and you waited just long enough to make it look decent before you threw us away. Don't you talk to me like that, boy." But there was no strength in it, just the weak protest of a man who knew he was already damned. Danny straightened up. At 13, he was already nearly as tall as his father, and in that moment he felt ancient. Felt like he'd lived 100 years in the space between one breath and the next. "Get out." "Danny, you don't understand the position I'm in. The debt, the pressure, trying to be both mother and father to 5 kids when I can barely keep myself together. I'm doing this for you. You're doing this for you, and that's fine. A man's got a right to choose his own path. Danny walked to the door and pulled it open. Dawn was just starting to break, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. But if you walk out that door, you're not our father anymore. You're just a man who used to be something and chose to be nothing instead. William grabbed his bag. His hands shook as he pulled the drawstring tight. When he walked to this door, he stopped next to Danny, opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closed it again. Some things couldn't be said. Some things were too heavy for words. He left without looking back. Danny watched him walk down the dirt path until he disappeared around the bend, becoming just another shadow in the early morning light. Then he closed the door, walked to his mama's rocking chair, and sat down to figure out how he was going to save his family from the choice his father had made. Emma found him there an hour later. She was 11 years old with their mama's brown hair and serious eyes that had seen too much for someone her age. She took one look at Danny's face and knew. "He's gone, isn't he?" Danny nodded. "For good." "Yes." She sat down on the floor at his feet, pulling her nightgown over her knees. "What did he say?" So Danny told her every word, every betrayal. When he got to the part about Sheriff Hutchins coming to collect them, Emma's face went pale, but she didn't cry. She'd learned the same lesson Danny had learned. Crying didn't fix things. It just wasted water and time. "When's he coming?" "Tomorrow," Pa said. "Then we run tonight." Danny looked down at his sister, 11 years old, thin as a fence post, but with steel in her spine that put grown men to shame. "Where are we going to go, Em? We got no money, no family, nowhere to hide that Hutchins won't find us eventually." "We'll figure it out." She stood up, brushing dust from her nightgown. "We always do. Wake Grace and Owen quiet like. I'll get Ruby ready. We pack what we can carry and we're gone before the sun's up proper." "Emma." "What?" "I'm scared." She knelt down and took his face in her small hands. "Me too, but Mama made me promise something before she died. Made me swear on the copper pot, on her mama's memory, on everything holy. She made me promise we'd stay together no matter what. And I don't break promises, Danny. Not even when I'm scared." They woke the others carefully. Grace cried a little, but quieted when Emma held her. Owen didn't make a sound, just gripped Danny's hand tight enough to hurt and didn't let go. Ruby was too young to understand, just accepted being dressed and carried with the easy trust of a child who thinks adults have everything figured out. They packed what mattered. Clothes enough for one change each. The money jar from under Mama's bed, which held exactly $2.37. The family Bible with all their names written in the front. And Emma's copper pot, the one Mama had used to make soup and stew and biscuits that melted on your tongue. It was heavy and awkward to carry, but Emma insisted. "It's all we got left of her," she said, and that was that. They left before dawn, slipping out the back, while darkness still held strong. Behind them, the house stood empty, and sad windows dark like closed eyes. Ahead lay nothing but uncertainty and the desperate hope that somewhere in Wyoming, there was a place for 5 orphan children who'd learned that family could betray you faster than any stranger ever would. The first 3 months were harder than anything Danny could have imagined. They lived in abandoned buildings and stole food when they had to. Danny worked odd jobs when he could find them, mucking out stables and splitting wood and hauling grain, taking payment in food instead of money when possible. Emma cooked whatever they could scrounge, making miracles out of scraps and day-old bread and vegetables farmers threw away. Grace sang on street corners for pennies, her voice sweet and clear as a bell. Owen stopped talking entirely after the second week, just followed Danny everywhere in silence with haunted eyes. Ruby got sick, twice fever burning through her small body, while they huddled in whatever shelter they'd found and prayed she'd make it through. They almost got caught 4 times. Sheriff Hutchins put out notices, wanted posters with their descriptions. 5 orphans, dangerous and desperate, reward for information leading to capture. People looked at them with suspicion when they passed through towns. Danny learned to spot the law from 3 blocks away, learned which alleys had exits and which were dead ends, learned how to disappear into crowds and blend with shadows. He also learned how to fight. The first time was in Laramie when the 2 boys older than him tried to take the coins Grace had earned singing. Danny put one down with a punch to the throat and the other with a knee to the groin, then grabbed Grace and ran before anyone could intervene. The second time was in Rawlins when a drunk tried to grab Emma. Danny broke the man's nose with a rock and didn't feel a single moment of guilt about it. Violence, he discovered, came easy when the people you loved were threatened. It came natural as breathing, primal and clean and necessary. His father had run from responsibility. Danny learned to run toward danger instead because someone had to stand between his family and a world that wanted to break them apart. But they couldn't run forever. The money ran out. The jobs got harder to find. People started recognizing their faces from the notices. And Ruby's cough came back deeper this time, wet and rattling in her chest in a way that made Danny's stomach clench with fear. That's when Mrs. Patterson found them. They were huddled behind her general store in Willow Creek, trying to sleep on empty stomachs, while Ruby wheezed in Emma's arms. Mrs. Patterson came out to throw away potato peelings and nearly dropped the bucket when she saw them. "Lord have mercy," she said, pressing one hand to her chest. "Children, what are you doing back here?" Danny stood up fast, putting himself between her and his siblings. "We're leaving. We don't want trouble." "You look like trouble already found you and beat you half to death." She set down the bucket and studied them with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "How long since you ate proper?" "We ate yesterday," Emma lied. "Try 3 days ago, and even then it wasn't much." Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "Come inside. I got stew still warm and bread from this morning. You can eat while we talk." "We can't pay." "Did I ask for payment?" She turned and headed for the back door. "You coming or not? Because I'm not inclined to stand out here the arguing while that baby coughs herself into pneumonia." They followed because hunger won out over caution and because something in Mrs. Patterson's voice said she wouldn't turn them into Hutchins. The stew was thick with beef and vegetables, the bread fresh and soft. They ate like wolves, hardly chewing, and Mrs. Patterson watched with a mix of sadness and anger on her weathered face. When they'd finished, she poured them each a cup of milk and sat down across the table. "I know who you are," she said quietly. "Seen the notices. Sullivan children wanted for running from state custody." "Question is, why'd you run?" Danny met her eyes. "Our pa sold us. Signed papers giving Hutchins permission to take us to the orphanage, split us up, send us wherever he pleased. Said it was for our own good, but really it was because we were too much trouble and he wanted to start fresh, somewhere new." Mrs. Patterson's jaw tightened. "And you chose to run instead." "We chose to stay together," Emma said. "That's what Mama made us promise. Together, no matter what." "Well," Mrs. Patterson stood and walked to the window looking out at the street beyond. "I'm going to tell you something and you can do with it what you will. There's a man named Jacob Brennan owns a ranch about 15 miles north of here. Stone Ridge Ranch, biggest spread in 3 counties. He lost his wife and daughter in a fire 7 years back, and he's been looking for a cook ever since. Goes through them like water because his standards are too high and his temperament's too low. Nobody can please him, and nobody stays long." "Why are you telling us this?" Danny asked. "Because if your sister there can cook half as good as my nose says she can, she might have a chance." Mrs. Patterson turned back to face them. "Brennan's a hard man, mean some would say, but he's fair in his own way, and he's got no love for Hutchins. The two of them have butted heads more times than I can count. If anyone in this territory would be willing to stand between you and the sheriff, it'd be him. How do we find this ranch? Follow the north road to Miller's Creek, cross at the shallow point, then keep the mountains on your left. When the road forks, take the right path. Can't miss it once you get close. Big place, 2-story log house, red barn you can see for a mile." Emma looked at Danny. Something passed between them, a silent conversation in the language siblings develop when words become unreliable. Emma touched the copper pot she'd set beside her chair. "If we go," she said slowly, "if we ask for work and he turns us down, we're done. That's the end of the road. Hutchins will find us eventually, and that'll be that." "Better than not trying," Grace whispered. Owen nodded, still silent. Ruby coughed, the sound thick and terrible. Danny made the choice because someone had to. "We go tonight, soon as it's dark. Mrs. Patterson, thank you for the food and the information. We won't forget it." "See that you don't." She stood and walked to a cupboard, pulling out a small cloth bag. "Take this. Biscuits from this morning, some jerky apples. It's not much, but it'll get you to Stone Ridge. And children," they looked at her, "whatever you did to end up wanted, whatever violence was done, I don't believe for a second it wasn't deserved. Sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing. You remember that." They left when the sun started sinking, 5 shadows moving through Willow Creek like ghosts. Danny led them through alleys and backways, avoiding the main street where Hutchins liked to patrol. They made it to the edge of town without incident, and Danny was just starting to think they might actually get away clean when a voice called out from behind them. Well, well, if it isn't the Sullivan brats. Deputy Miller stepped out from behind the livery stable. He was a big man, thick-necked and mean-eyed, the kind who enjoyed his badge a little too much. Behind him, Sheriff Hutchins emerged from the shadows with two more deputies. Running again, Hutchins said. Getting tired of this game, children. Time to come along peaceful-like and make this easy on everyone. Danny stepped in front of his siblings. We're not going with you. That's not your choice to make. Whose choice is it? Our father's. He gave up that right when he sold us. Yours, you don't own us, Sheriff. Nobody owns us. Hutchins' face hardened. The law says you're wards of the state. The law says I have a duty to collect you and see you properly cared for. Now you can come peaceful, or you can come hard, but you're coming either way. No. The word came out flat and final. We're not. Miller moved first. He lunged for Grace, big hands reaching to grab her by the arm. Grace screamed. Owen's eyes squeezed shut. Emma pulled Ruby back. And Danny, who'd spent 3 months learning that violence sometimes answered questions, words never could, threw himself at the deputy with every ounce of strength he had. His first punch caught Miller in the jaw, snapping the man's head sideways. His second drove into the deputy's gut, doubling him over. The third split Miller's lip, blood spraying hot across Danny's knuckles. The deputy stumbled back, shocked and enraged, and Danny kept coming because stopping meant losing, and losing meant watching his family get torn apart. Miller grabbed for his belt, maybe for his gun, or maybe for his club, but Emma was already moving. She swung Mama's copper pot with both hands, putting her whole body behind it, and the pot connected with Miller's skull with a sound like a hammer hitting wood. The deputy's eyes rolled back. His knees buckled. He collapsed face first into the dirt and didn't move. Time seemed to stop. Danny stood there, breathing hard, fists still clenched, blood on his hands. Emma held the dented copper pot, her face white as milk. Grace had stopped screaming, but the sound still echoed in Danny's ears. Owen's eyes were still shut, hands pressed over his ears. Ruby cried in confusion and fear. And Sheriff Hutchins stood 10 feet away, with his gun drawn, shaking with rage or shock or both. That's where the night had started. That's where everything changed. And that's where Danny learned that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones you don't even know you're making until they're already made and there's no taking them back. But all that was hours ago now, miles behind them. They'd been running for 3 hours straight, following Mrs. Patterson's directions by moonlight, and Danny's legs burned like fire. Emma carried Ruby on her back, the little girl having fallen asleep despite the jostling. Grace stumbled along holding Owen's hand, both of them exhausted but determined. The copper pot banged against Emma's hip with every step, a constant reminder of what they'd done and what they were running from. Danny called a halt when they reached Miller's Creek. The water ran cold and clear over smooth stones, reflecting moonlight like scattered diamonds. They had to cross here, but Ruby's cough had gotten worse, and the thought of dunking her in icy water made Danny's chest tight with worry. How far you think we've come? Emma asked, easing Ruby down to sit on the creek bank. Maybe 10 miles, maybe less. Hard to tell in the dark. So we got another 5 to go. Give or take. Grace sat down hard, pulling Owen into her lap. I don't think I can walk 5 more miles. You can and you will, Danny said, but his voice came out gentler than the words. We're almost there, Gracie. Just a little further. And then what? This Brennan man lets us stay. Just like that, no questions asked. Then we see. Danny knelt by the water, cupping his hands to drink. The cold shocked his throat, drove away some of the exhaustion. But it's the only chance we got left, so we take it. Emma joined him at the water's edge. In the moonlight, she looked older than 11 lines of worry around her eyes that no child should have. She'd taken on so much cooking and caring and holding everyone together while Danny ran from Hutchins and looked for work and tried to be the man his father had refused to be. Danny, she said quietly, what we did back there, what I did, Deputy Miller, he might be dead. He might be. That makes me a murderer. That makes you someone who protected their family. Danny looked at his little sister, at the fear and guilt warring in her eyes. You think I wanted to punch a lawman? You think I enjoyed hurting him? I did what I had to do. Same as you. And if God wants to judge us for that, he can stand in line behind everyone else. Mama would be so ashamed. Mama would be proud. Danny took Emma's face in his hands the way she'd done to him that morning after Pa left. She told you to keep us together. You're doing that. The rest is just details. They crossed the creek in the shallowest spot they could find, wading through knee-deep water that stole the breath from their lungs. Owen slipped on the slick stones, and Danny caught him, held him steady, while the boy's small body shook from cold and fear and exhaustion. On the far bank, they wrung out their clothes as best they could and kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering, and remembering meant feeling, and they couldn't afford to feel right now. The mountains rose on their left, dark shapes against a star-filled sky. Danny had never seen so many stars. In town, they were dimmed by lamplight and obscured by smoke, but out here, they blazed fierce and bright, countless points of light spread across eternity. For a moment, he let himself imagine Mama up there somewhere, watching over them, proud of what they'd become, even if the path had been soaked in blood and copper. The fork in the road came just before dawn. Right path misses. Patterson had said, "Can't miss the ranch once you get close." Danny chose right and prayed she was telling the truth, because if she wasn't, if this was all some elaborate trap or misunderstanding, they had nowhere left to run and no strength left to try. The sun broke over the mountains just as Stone Ridge Ranch came into view. Danny stopped walking, and behind him, his siblings stopped too, all of them staring at what lay spread out in the valley below. The ranch was massive, bigger than anything Danny had imagined. Pastures stretched for what looked like miles, dotted with cattle that grazed peacefully in the early light. The barn stood 3 stories tall, red paint fading, but structure solid, big enough to hold 100 horses. Outbuildings scattered around the main house, each one well-maintained and purposeful. And the house itself, 2 stories of log and stone smoke, rising from the chimney windows, catching first light like they were made of gold instead of glass. "That's it," Emma breathed. "That has to be it." "It's so big," Grace whispered. Owen just stared, eyes wide. Ruby coughed in Emma's arms, the sound wet and concerning. Danny squared his shoulders. This was it, the last chance. The end of the road or the beginning of something new. He started down the path toward the ranch gate, and his family followed, because that's what families did. They followed each other into the unknown and hoped like hell they'd all make it out the other side. 2 men sat on the fence near the gate playing cards on an overturned crate. They looked up as the children approached, and Danny watched their expressions shift from boredom to surprise, to something that might have been pity or might have been disgust. One was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and a weathered face. The other was younger, nervous-looking, with quick eyes that darted between the children and back toward the main house. "Well, I'll be damned," the older one said. "Pete, you seeing this?" Pete squinted at them. "I'm seeing. Don't mean I understand. You kids lost." Danny stepped forward. He was aware of how they must look. Filthy from 3 months of running. Clothes torn and stained. Shoes worn through at the soles. Emma holding a dented copper pot, and Ruby both. Grace with her arms around Owen's shoulders. All of them exhausted and desperate, and probably looking half wild. "We're looking for Jacob Brennan," Danny said, keeping his voice level. "We heard he needs a cook." The men exchanged glances. Then the older one, he'd later learn his name was Sam Cooper, started laughing. Not cruel laughter, but the surprised kind, like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. "A cook," Sam repeated. "Son, you're what, 13, and you think the boss is going to hire children to work his kitchen?" "Not me, my sister." Danny gestured to Emma. "She can cook, best in Wyoming. Our mama taught her everything." "I'm sure your mama taught her real good," Pete said. "But Mr. Brennan don't hire children. He's got standards, and those standards don't include having kids running around his kitchen." "She's 11, but she cooks like she's 30, Danny insisted. "Give her a chance, 1 meal. If it's not good enough, we'll leave and never bother you again." Sam climbed down from the fence, walking closer. His eyes were kind, despite his words. "What are you kids really doing here? You run away from home. Your folks know where you are." "Our ma's dead," Emma said quietly. "Our pa sold us to the state for $50 and a bar tab. We've been running from Sheriff Hutchins for 3 months. This is the last place we got left to go. If Mr. Brennan won't hire me, we'll die out there somewhere. So when I say I can cook, when I say I'll work harder than anyone you've ever seen, I mean it, because we don't have any other choice." The smile faded from Sam's face. He studied them again, seeing past the dirt and exhaustion to the desperation underneath. Pete looked away uncomfortable. "Wait here," Sam said finally. "I'll go talk to the boss. But don't get your hopes up. Jacob Brennan's heart died in a fire 7 years ago, and what's left ain't inclined toward charity." He walked toward the main house, leaving Pete to watch them with obvious discomfort. Nobody spoke. Danny held his breath. Emma shifted Ruby in her arms. Grace leaned against Owen. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the air, and Danny wondered if this was what hope felt like, or if it was just the last moments before hope died completely. Sam returned 5 minutes later. Behind him came a man who made Danny's breath catch in his throat. Jacob Brennan was the biggest human being Danny had ever seen. He stood at least 6.5 feet tall, shoulders broad as a barn door, hands the size of dinner plates. His hair was dark shot through with gray, pulled back from a face that looked like it had been carved from granite by someone who didn't believe in softness or mercy. But it was his eyes that truly captured Danny's attention. Gray as storm clouds, cold as winter rivers, and completely, utterly empty. Looking into those eyes was like looking into a well with no bottom, just darkness going down and down forever. "What's going on here?" The voice matched the man, deep and rough, like distant thunder. Sam gestured at the children. "Boss, these kids are looking for work. Say their sister can cook." "I don't hire children." "I know that, boss. Told them as much. But they seem pretty desperate, and I thought maybe you'd want to talk to them yourself before we sent them on their way." Brennan's eyes swept over them, taking in every detail with clinical precision. Danny forced himself to stand straight to meet that terrible gaze without flinching. Emma stepped forward, still holding Ruby, the copper pot hanging from her other hand. "Mr. Brennan," she said, and her voice only trembled a little. "My name is Emma Sullivan. This is my family. We heard you need a cook. I can do it. I'm good at it. Give me 1 week to prove myself. If you don't like what I make, we'll leave and never bother you again." "You're what, 10, 11, sir?" 11. Brennan's jaw tightened. "And you think you can cook for 17 grown men who work from dawn till dusk and eat like horses?" "Yes, sir." "That's nerve. I'll give you that. But nerve don't make biscuits, little girl." Emma set Ruby down carefully and held up the copper pot. "This was my mama's, sir. She could take nothing and make something. She could cook food that would make grown men cry. She taught me everything she knew before she died, and I promise you I won't let you down." Brennan stared at the pot. Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify there, and gone like heat lightning. His eyes caught on something, and Danny followed his gaze to the side of the pot where dried blood still stained the copper. "That blood," Brennan said quietly. "Whose is it?" Danny stepped forward before Emma could answer. "A man who tried to take our family apart, sir. Deputy in Willow Creek. He put hands on my sister Grace, so I put my fists in his face, and Emma made sure he stayed down." "You kill him?" "Don't know, sir, but I would have if it meant keeping my family together." The silence stretched out so long Danny thought he might break under the weight of it. Brennan looked at him. Really looked like he was seeing something he recognized or remembered. The gray eyes weren't quite so empty anymore. Something moved behind them, distant as mountains but present. "You're 13, Brennan said, not a question." "Yes, sir. Justo." "And you took responsibility for 4 younger siblings." "Someone had to." "Your father?" "Sold us and ran." Brennan's expression didn't change, but something in the set of his shoulders shifted. "How long you been running?" 3 months, sir. Living rough, working, when we can, stealing when we have to. Ruby there, she's got pneumonia starting. Grace hasn't had a real meal in a week. Owen stopped talking 6 weeks back. And Emma, she's held us together with spit and prayer and that copper pot. So when we ask for a chance, when we say we'll work harder than anyone you've ever seen, we mean it. Because we don't have anything left except each other. Brennan was quiet for so long, Danny started to think he'd simply walk away without another word. Then Owen moved. The little 5-year-old boy, silent and small and traumatized, walked slowly across the dusty ground. He approached Brennan like a rabbit approaching a wolf, each step careful and deliberate. When he reached the big man, Owen looked up with his two old eyes and slowly, carefully reached out one small hand to touch Brennan's palm. Just a touch. Just a moment of contact. Owen's fingertips against Brennan's calloused hand. Brennan went completely still. His face drained of color. His hand, the one Owen had touched, started to tremble. For a second, Danny thought the man might collapse, thought something had broken inside him. Then Brennan's eyes closed, and when they opened again, they were wet. "What's his name?" Brennan's voice came out rough as gravel. "Owen, sir. He hasn't spoken since our pa left." Brennan knelt down, bringing himself to Owen's level. The boy didn't step back, just watched with those solemn eyes while this giant of a man studied him like he was something precious and fragile. "Owen," Brennan said softly. "That's a good name." Owen didn't respond, just kept his hand where it was touching Brennan's palm. Brennan closed his eyes again, drew a shaky breath. When he stood back up, his face had gone hard again, but something fundamental had shifted. The emptiness in his eyes wasn't quite as complete anymore. "1 week," he said. "Food's good, you stay. Food's not good, you're gone." "Clear." "Yes, sir," Emma said quickly. "Those children stay out of my way. I don't want to see them, hear them, or be reminded they exist. They work, they stay quiet, they don't cause trouble. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "And boy." Brennan looked at Danny. "You act like a man. You protect your family. I respect that. But if you ever lie to me, if you ever betray my trust, I'll throw you out so fast your head will spin. I don't care how many hungry mouths you got or how many promises you made. We clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." Brennan nodded once sharp and final. "Sam, show them to the kitchen quarters. Get them settled. Tell them what's expected." He turned to walk away, then stopped. "And Sam, have Doc Martin come look at the little one. That cough sounds like it could turn bad." "Yes, boss." Brennan walked away without another word, his shoulders stiff and his stride purposeful. But Danny saw the way the man's hands shook at his sides, the way he kept them clenched into fists, like he was trying to hold something in or keep something out. Sam let out a long breath. "Well, that's the first time in 7 years I've seen the boss change his mind about anything. You kids must have some kind of magic." "We don't have magic," Danny said. "We just have each other. Sometimes that's the same thing." Sam gestured toward a small building attached to the back of the main house. "Come on, let's get you settled. You look like you could all use food rest and a good scrubbing. And little Miss Emma, you got a lot to prove come morning." They followed Sam across the ranch yard, 5 children who'd run from everything and ended up somewhere they never expected. The kitchen quarters were small but clean, 2 rooms with beds and a stove for heat. It was more than they'd had in 3 months. It was everything. Emma set Ruby down on one of the beds and the little girl immediately curled up, still coughing. Grace and Owen collapsed onto another bed, asleep almost before they hit the mattress. Danny just stood in the doorway looking out at the ranch that might become their home or might become their ending. Emma came to stand beside him, the copper pot clutched in both hands. "We made it," she said quietly. "We made it to a 1-week trial where if your cooking isn't perfect, we're back on the road with nowhere left to go. Still closer than we were yesterday." Danny couldn't argue with that. He looked down at his sister, at the determination in her young face, at the copper pot that had been their weapon and their heritage and their hope all at once. "Think you can do it?" he asked. "Think you can cook well enough to convince a man who hasn't cared about anything in 7 years that we're worth keeping?" Emma looked down at the pot, running her fingers over the dent from where it had struck Deputy Miller. When she looked back up, her eyes were dry and her jaw was set. "Mama made me promise to keep us together. I don't break promises, Danny. Not even when they're impossible." "Then I guess we better hope impossible is just another word for difficult." They stood there together as the sun climbed higher. 2 children who'd become adults too soon, carrying weight no child should carry, making choices no child should make. Tomorrow, Emma would cook breakfast for 17 hungry men, and their whole future would hang on whether her biscuits were light enough, her bacon crispy enough, her gravy thick enough. Tomorrow, Danny would learn what it meant to work a ranch to earn his place, to stand beside men twice his age and prove he deserved to be there. But tonight they had beds. They had shelter. They had 1 week to prove their worth, and that was 1 week more than they'd had when the sun rose that morning. Danny closed the door and fell onto the last available bed without even bothering to undress. His last thought before sleep took him was of Owen's small hand touching Jacob Brennan's palm, and the way that simple gesture had cracked something in a man who everyone said had no feelings left at all. Maybe impossible wasn't just another word for difficult. Maybe impossible was just another word for haven't tried yet. He'd know in 6 days. Until then, all they could do was survive and hope that survival was enough. Part 2. Honey and Ashes. Emma woke before dawn with her heart already racing. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was, just knew that sleeping past sunrise meant danger, meant being caught, meant losing everything. Then memory flooded back. Stone Ridge Ranch. Jacob Brennan. 1 week to prove they deserved to stay. She sat up in the dim light filtering through the window and saw her siblings still sleeping. Grace curled around Owen like a protective shell. Ruby's breathing rattled, but seemed a little easier than yesterday. Danny sprawled across his bed, fully dressed, one hand hanging off the edge, fingers curled, like he'd been reaching for something in his dreams. The copper pot sat on the small table where she'd left it. Emma picked it up, feeling the familiar weight that dents from years of use and one night of violence. She traced the bloodstain with her thumb. Deputy Miller's blood dried to a rusty brown that wouldn't come out no matter how hard she scrubbed. A reminder of what they'd done, what she'd done. She'd swung this pot with every ounce of strength in her gut and felt it connect with bone and heard that terrible crack and watched a man fall. She was 11 years old and might be a murderer, but she was also a cook. And right now, cooking was what would save them. The kitchen was dark and cold. Emma found matches and lit the stove, coaxing flame from kindling until heat began to spread through the room. On the counter, she found a note written in sharp, angular handwriting. 17 men. They eat like horses. Don't disappoint me. No signature. Didn't need one. Emma knew who'd written it. She explored the kitchen while the stove heated. Flour in the bin, good quality and fresh. Eggs in a basket, 2 dozen at least. Bacon hanging in the cold room, thick slabs of it. Butter in the crock. Coffee beans in a jar. Salt, pepper, large sugar. More food in one place than she'd seen in 3 months. More food than she knew what to do with. Except she did know. Mama had taught her. All those mornings watching Mama work the dough, listening to her explain why you added just a pinch of this or a spoonful of that. The way Mama's hands had moved, confident and sure, creating magic from simple ingredients. Emma closed her eyes and could almost feel her mother standing behind her, hands guiding her, voice soft in her ear. Cooking is love made visible, baby girl. You put your heart in it, people can taste that. They might not know what makes it good, but they'll know it's special. Emma opened her eyes and got to work. Biscuits first. She mixed flour and lard and milk, working the dough just enough to bring it together, but not so much it would get tough. Mama's hands guiding, ghost hands showing her how. She rolled and filled 2 baking sheets with perfect circles of dough. Then just before sliding them into the oven, she did something Mama had taught her years ago. She drizzled just a little honey over the tops. Not enough to make them sweet, just enough to give them something extra. Something that would make men pause and wonder what that taste was, that hint of sunshine they couldn't quite place. Honey is sunshine to bread, Mama used to say. Adds light where there wasn't any before. Emma put the biscuits in the oven and moved to the bacon. She laid out strips in the big cast iron skillet, careful not to let them overlap. As they sizzled, she cracked eggs into a bowl, added cream and a pinch of pepper. The kitchen filled with smells that made her stomach growl and her hands shake with hunger, but she didn't stop to eat. Not yet. Not until the men were fed. Danny appeared in the doorway as she was making gravy from the bacon drippings. You need help. Can you cook? No, but I can learn. Emma smiled despite her nerves. Set the table, plates, forks, cups, coffee mugs. Make sure there's enough for everyone. Danny worked quickly, his movements efficient despite exhaustion. They'd learned to work together over these 3 months, developed a rhythm where words weren't always necessary. Emma cooked, Danny assisted, and together they made it work. The biscuits came out golden brown and perfect. The bacon crispy at the edges, but still tender in the middle. The eggs scrambled, soft and creamy. The gravy thick and rich. Emma arranged it all on the big serving platters, poured coffee into the massive pot, and stood back to look at what she created. It looked like hope. It smelled like survival. It tasted, she knew without even trying it, like Mama's love turned into breakfast. The door opened at precisely 6 o'clock. The men filed in 17 cowboys in various stages of wakefulness, talking and laughing until they saw the table. Then conversation stopped. They stared at the spread like they'd never seen food before. Sam Cooper stepped forward first. He picked up a biscuit, turned it over in his weathered hands, studied it like it might contain secrets. Then he took a bite, his eyes closed. His face went still. For a long moment, he just stood there, chewing slowly, and Emma held her breath, waiting for judgment. "Lord Almighty," Sam said finally. "Boys, you need to try this." The men descended on the table like locusts. They grabbed biscuits and bacon, scooped eggs onto plates, poured gravy over everything. The sounds they made weren't quite decent. Groans of pleasure, muttered curses of disbelief, the clatter of forks against plates as they went back for seconds before they had even finished first. A young cowboy with red hair looked up at Emma with something like reverence in his eyes. "Miss, these are the best biscuits I've ever tasted. What did you put in them?" "Just the usual," Emma said quietly. "Flour, lard, milk." "There's something else, something I can't place." "Honey," Emma admitted. "Just a little. My mama taught me." "Your mama taught you right." The cowboy took another bite, closing his eyes. "This tastes like home, like Sunday morning when you were a kid and everything was safe and good." Emma felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. She couldn't afford to cry. Not now. Not when everything depended on being strong. The men cleaned every platter. 17 grown cowboys, and not a scrap of food remained when they finally pushed back from the table. Sam stood and adjusted his hat. "Miss Emma, I owe you an apology. Yesterday I didn't think you could do it. I was wrong." "Most folks are," Emma said, then immediately worried she'd been too sharp. But Sam just laughed. "I reckon you're right. Now I bet I won't tell the boss his breakfast is ready. Though knowing him, he probably already knows from how this kitchen smells." Emma's stomach clenched. The men had been easy hungry and grateful for good food. But Jacob Brennan was different. Brennan had standards no one could meet. Brennan had a dead wife who'd probably cooked like an angel. How was Emma supposed to compete with a ghost? She prepared his tray with shaking hands. The best biscuit, the crispiest bacon. Eggs cooked perfectly. Coffee in a cup she'd scrubbed until it gleamed. And after a moment's hesitation, a small dish of honey on the side. Sam had told her where Brennan's study was. Emma carried the tray down the long hallway, her footsteps echoing on wood floors. The house felt empty despite its size, like a body with no soul. Pictures should have hung on these walls. Rugs should have covered these floors, but there was nothing. Just bare walls and silence and the ghost of a family that had burned. She knocked on the heavy oak door. "What?" The voice from inside was sharp, annoyed. "It's Emma, sir. I brought your breakfast." "Leave it outside." Emma hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to do what he said, to set down the tray and run back to safety. But that's not how you won someone over. That's not how you proved you were worth keeping. She opened the door and walked in. Brennan sat behind a massive desk covered in papers and ledgers. He looked up with an expression that could have frozen water in July. "I said leave it outside." "I heard you, sir." Emma crossed the room and set the tray on the edge of his desk. "But hot food doesn't stay hot long, and cold biscuits aren't worth eating." Brennan stared at her. For a second, Emma thought she'd gone too far, thought he'd throw her out right then. Then something shifted in his face. Not quite a smile, but close. "You've got nerve, I'll give you that." "So I've been told, sir." Brennan looked down at the tray. He picked up a biscuit, examined it with the same careful attention Sam had shown. Emma watched his face as he took a bite, watched him go completely still, watched something flicker across his features, there and gone, like heat lightning. "This honey," Brennan said slowly. "You put honey in these?" "Yes, sir. Just a little. My mama used to say it was like sunshine to bread." The biscuit fell from Brennan's hand. His face had gone pale, his eyes distant. When he spoke again, his voice came out rough and broken. "Sunshine to bread. That's what she used to call it. My wife, Catherine, she'd drizzle honey on her biscuits and say that exact phrase. Sunshine to bread." Emma's heart stopped. She hadn't known. How could she have known? But she'd stumbled into something private and painful, had accidentally torn open a wound 7 years hadn't healed. "Sir, I didn't mean to." "Get out." "Sir, I said get out." His voice cracked. "Leave the tray. Just go." Emma ran. She made it back to the kitchen before her legs gave out, sliding down against the cupboard to sit on the floor. Her whole body shook. She'd ruined it. One breakfast in, and she'd already ruined everything by reminding Brennan of the wife he'd lost. Danny found her there 10 minutes later. He knelt beside her, put his arm around her shoulders. "What happened?" "I hurt him." Emma's voice came out small and broken. "I made biscuits with honey like Mama taught me, and his wife used to do the same thing. I reminded him of what he lost, and now he hates me." "Em, he told me to get out, Danny. Couldn't even look at me. We're done. We're finished." Danny pulled her closer. "Sam came to find me. Said the boss ate every bite on that tray. Said it's the first time in months Brennan's cleaned his plate." Emma looked up. "What?" "He wasn't angry at you. He was remembering. And for a man who spent 7 years trying to forget, remembering probably hurts worse than any physical pain could. But we need him to want us to stay. How's he going to want that if I keep making him sad? Maybe sad is better than nothing. Maybe feeling something, even pain, is better than being dead inside." Danny helped her stand. "You did good, Em. You cooked like Mama taught you, and you reminded a broken man what it felt like to be whole. That's not a bad thing." Emma wanted to believe him. She really did. But all she could see was Brennan's face going pale, his voice breaking the way he'd told her to leave, like her presence was poison. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emma prepared lunch, dinner, each meal as good as the last. The Cowboys praised every bite. Sam reported that Brennan ate everything she sent to his study. But the man himself never appeared. Never came to thank her or tell her it was good or confirm that yes, she could stay past this 1-week trial. By nightfall, Emma was exhausted. She checked on Ruby, whose cough sounded a little better after Doc Martin's visit and medicine. She helped Grace and Owen get ready for bed. She sat with Danny on the front step of their small quarters and watched stars come out over Wyoming. "One day down," Danny said. 6 to go. "Feels like 100. We've survived worse." "Have we?" Emma looked at her brother. 3 months running, that was simple. Scary, but simple. This is complicated. This is trying to fit into a place that doesn't want us, trying to convince a man who's forgotten how to care that we're worth caring about. Then we show him, every breakfast, every lunch, every dinner. We show him we're worth it. Emma wanted to argue, but didn't have the strength. She went to bed that night with the copper pot beside her pillow, one hand resting on its battered surface. In the darkness, she whispered to her mother's memory, "I hope I'm doing this right, Mama. I hope you'd be proud." The copper pot didn't answer, but somewhere in the main house, Jacob Brennan sat in his study staring at an empty plate that had held the best breakfast he'd eaten in 7 years. And for the first time since fire took his family, he felt something other than emptiness. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it was something. And something was better than nothing at all. The second morning came too early. Emma dragged herself out of bed and into the kitchen, her whole body aching from exhaustion. She'd slept poorly, dreams full of fire and blood, and copper pots swinging through darkness. But the men needed feeding, and she needed to prove yesterday wasn't a fluke. She made flapjacks and sausage eggs and fried potatoes. The Cowboys ate with the same enthusiasm as the day before. Sam reported that Brennan had requested the same breakfast as yesterday with the honey biscuits. Emma made them exactly the same way, her hands shaking as she drizzled honey over the dough. When she brought the tray to his study, Brennan told her to come in instead of leaving it outside. She entered cautiously, like approaching a wild animal that might bolt or attack without warning. Brennan looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face haggard, but when he spoke, his voice was steady. "Sit down." Emma sat in the chair across from his desk, back straight, hands folded in her lap. "This morning," Brenton said slowly, "I was harsh with you. That wasn't fair." "You don't need to apologize, sir." "I'm not apologizing, I'm explaining. There's a difference, do you see him?" He leaned back in his chair. "My wife's name was Catherine. Kate. She was the best cook I've ever known. Made biscuits that could make grown men weep, put honey on them, said it was sunshine to bread." Emma stayed quiet, letting him talk. "She died 7 years ago, her and my daughter both. Fire took them while I was away on a cattle drive. I came home to ashes and bodies and a life that ended even though I kept breathing." "I'm so sorry, sir." Don't be, wasn't your fault. Brennan's gaze drifted to something on his desk, a small photograph in a silver frame. My daughter's name was Lily Ann. She was almost 7 years old when she died. Prettiest little thing you ever saw. Had her mama's eyes and her daddy's stubborn streak. He fell silent. Emma waited, barely breathing. You remind me of her, Brennan said finally. Not in looks, in spirit. The way you walked into my study yesterday like you owned the place. The way you stood up to me at the gate. Lily Ann was like that, fearless, stubborn as a mule. Sir, I'm not finished. Brennan's eyes locked onto hers. I don't know your story, don't know where you came from or what you're running from. And frankly, I don't care. What I care about is whether you can do the job. And based on this morning's evidence, you might be right. Emma felt hope flutter in her chest like a trapped bird. Does that mean? It means you've got 5 more days to prove yourself. Think you can do that? Yes, sir. Good. Brennan's voice hardened slightly. Now about those siblings of yours, the little one, the boy who doesn't talk. What's his story? Owen, sir, he's 5. He stopped talking when our father left. Doctor called it nervous shock. Said his mind just shut down the part that makes words. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. And the others? Danny's 13. He thinks he's the man of the family even though he's just a boy. Grace is 8. She sings when she's scared, makes up songs to keep herself calm. And Ruby's 3. She doesn't understand much of what's happening, which might be a blessing. Your father abandoned you. Yes, sir, 6 months ago. And your mother? Dead, sir. Fever took her a year ago. Brennan shook his head slowly. You've been taking care of them all by yourself. Yes, sir. For 6 months. Yes, sir. You're 11 years old. Age doesn't matter when there's work to be done, sir. For a long moment, Brennan just looked at her. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small leather pouch. Coins clinked in Sudan. Advance on your wages, he said, tossing it to her. Get those children some proper clothes. There's a general store in Willow Creek about 5 miles east. Sam can take you tomorrow. Emma caught the pouch, stunned. Sir, I can't. You can and you will? I won't have anyone working for me looking like ragamuffins. Brennan pulled a stack of papers toward him. Now get out. I've got work to do. Thank you, sir, for everything. Don't thank me yet. You've still got 5 days to prove yourself. Emma left the study with the pouch clutched against her chest, her mind reeling. An advance on wages, proper clothes for the children. Was this real? Could they actually be safe here? She found Danny in the barn learning how to groom horses from Sam. Her brother looked up when she entered, saw her face, and immediately came over. What happened? He gave us money for clothes. Said Sam will take us to town tomorrow. Danny's eyes went wide. He what? And he ate all his breakfast again. And he told me about his wife and daughter. And he said I remind him of his daughter. The words tumbled out too fast, tripping over each other. Danny, I think maybe we're going to be okay. I think maybe he's going to let us stay. Don't count on it yet, Sam said, walking over with a brush in his hand. Boss has let people get close before and then pulled back. 7 years of grief does things to a man's heart. Makes it hard to trust, hard to open up. You kids might have cracked something open, but that doesn't mean it won't seal back up again. Then we'll just have to keep it open, Danny said. Whatever it takes. Sam studied Danny for a moment, then nodded slowly. You're a good kid. Your pa was a fool to throw you away. My pa was a drunk and a coward, Danny said flatly. But I'm not him. None of us are. No, Sam agreed. You are definitely not. The third day brought unexpected rain, cold and steady. Emma made soup and fresh bread food that would warm bodies and souls. The Cowboys tracked mud through the kitchen, but praised her cooking even louder than before. Brennan sent word through Sam that the soup was excellent. Emma felt like she could breathe a little easier. Then the 4th day came and everything changed. Emma woke to Ruby crying, not the usual fussy crying of a tired child, but the desperate wailing of real pain. She ran to where Grace was trying to comfort the little girl, saw Ruby's face flushed red, her small body trembling. She's burning up, Grace said, fear making her voice thin. Emma, she's so hot. Emma touched Ruby's forehead and felt heat that scared her down to her bones. She ran to wake Danny, who took one look and his face went pale. That's not good. I know it's not good. What do we do? We need a doctor. Danny was already pulling on his boots. I'll go find Brennan. Danny, it's 4 in the morning. I don't care what time it is. Danny ran through the rain to the main house and pounded on the door until a lamp flickered on inside. Brennan appeared a minute later, a hair mussed shirt, untucked, looking more human than Danny had seen him. What the hell is going on here, Ruby? She's sick, real sick. Fever and she can't breathe right, and I think it's pneumonia, and we need a doctor. Brennan's face changed. The sleepiness vanished, replaced by sharp focus. How long's she been like this? Just woke up this way. Please, Sam, if you know a doctor. Sam. Brennan's voice cracked like a whip. Somewhere in the bunkhouse, Sam woke and stumbled out. Saddle a horse, ride to town. Get Doc Martin. Tell him if he doesn't come immediately, I'll drag him here myself. Boss, that's 5 miles in the rain. Did I stutter? No, boss. Then move. Sam ran for the barn. Brennan turned back to Danny. Well, show me. They went to the small quarters where Emma sat holding Ruby, rocking her while the little girl coughed and cried. Grace and Owen huddled together on another bed, both terrified. Brennan stopped in the doorway, his big frame filling the space, and for a moment his face showed naked pain. Then it was gone, replaced by calm competence. He knelt beside Emma. Let me see her. Emma reluctantly handed Ruby over. Brennan held the small girl carefully like she was made of glass. He felt her forehead, listened to her breathing, checked her pulse. Pneumonia, he confirmed. Maybe 2 days developing. She needs medicine, rest, warmth. He looked at Emma. Why didn't you say something earlier? I didn't know it was this bad. She's been coughing, but I thought it was just from sleeping outside so long, and I'm not angry, I'm asking. Brennan's voice was surprisingly gentle. But from now on, if any of you are sick or hurt, you tell me immediately. Understand? Yes, sir. Brennan carried Ruby to the bed and covered her with blankets. Keep her warm. Give her water if she'll take it. Doc Martin will be here within the hour. Sir, Danny said, we can't pay for a doctor. Did I ask you to? No, but then don't worry about it. Brennan stood and walked to the door, then stopped. Your sister's been feeding my men and me for 4 days. Been working harder than most adults I know. You think I'm going to let her baby sister die over money? He left without waiting for an answer. Danny and Emma looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. Maybe Sam was wrong. Maybe Brennan's heart hadn't died in that fire. Maybe it had just been buried and they were digging it back up, one meal, one kindness, one desperate plea at a time. Doc Martin arrived 40 minutes later, soaked from the rain and grumbling about being dragged out of bed. But he took one look at Ruby and his complaints stopped. He examined her thoroughly, gave her medicine, left instructions for her care. She'll live, he said finally, but it was close. Another day or two and we'd have been having a different conversation. Emma nearly collapsed with relief. Danny caught her, held her steady while she shook. How much do we owe you? Danny asked the doctor. Already settled with Brennan. 20 for the visit, 10 for the medicine. Doc Martin packed his bag. That man's many things, but cheap ain't one of them. You kids landed in a good place even if the man running it forgot how to show it. After the doctor left, they sat vigil over Ruby. Grace sang soft songs. Owen held his little sister's hand. Danny and Emma took turns checking her temperature, giving her medicine, making sure she stayed warm. Brennan came by twice to check on her. Progress didn't say much. Just looked at the small girl, and something in his face went soft before he left again. By evening, Ruby's fever had broken. She woke up weak but coherent, asking for water and complaining she was hungry. Emma nearly cried with relief. She made Ruby soup and bread, watched the little girl eat slowly, carefully, getting strength back with each bite. That night, after everyone else was asleep, Emma found Brennan on the front porch of the main house. He stood in the darkness, looking out at the rain-soaked ranch. Mr. Brennan, he turned. She okay? Yes, sir, thanks to you. Thanks to Doc Martin. Thanks to you for sending for him, for paying for him, for caring enough to help. Emma stepped closer. We don't have much, sir. Can't repay you with money, but I promise I'll work harder than anyone you've ever hired. I'll cook the best meals you've ever eaten. I'll make you glad you let us stay. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. When Lillian was sick, she got sick with scarlet fever. We thought we'd lose her. I sat by her bed for 3 days straight, Didn't sleep, didn't eat, just prayed to a God I wasn't sure was listening. And she pulled through. She survived. He paused. 6 months later, she died in a fire while I was 50 miles away chasing cattle. I didn't get to say goodbye, didn't get to hold her one last time, just came home to find her gone. Emma didn't know what to say to that, so she just stood beside him in the darkness and let the silence hold them both. Seeing your brother come to my door this morning, Brennan continued, seeing the fear in his eyes, the desperation. It reminded me of how I felt when Lillian was sick, and I couldn't just turn away. Does that make sense? Yes, sir. Your family, Brennan said slowly, you're doing something to this place. To me, making it feel less like a tomb and more like a home. I'm not sure I'm ready for that, but I'm not sure I can stop it either. Would you want to if you could? Brennan looked down at her. In the faint light from the window, she could see his face, the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the weight of 7 years of grief. But she could also see something else, something that might have been hope, or might have been fear, or might have been both. No, he said finally, I don't think I would. The 5th and 6th days passed in a blur of cooking and caring for Ruby. Emma made meals that had the Cowboys singing her praises. Brennan ate every bite she sent to his study and twice came to the kitchen to tell her himself that the food was excellent. Danny worked alongside Sam and the other men learning to rope and ride and work cattle. Grace sang to Ruby and helped Emma with simple cooking tasks. Owen stayed close to everyone, still mostly silent but present in a way he hadn't been in weeks. On the 7th evening, their trial week complete, Brennan called Danny to his study. Danny went with his heart in his throat, knowing this was it, the final judgment. Stay or go, live or die in a way that had nothing to do with physical survival and everything to do with having a place in the world. Brennan sat behind his desk, papers spread before him, looking every inch the rancher and businessman. But his eyes were softer than they'd been a week ago, warmer, more alive. Sit down, son. Danny sat. It's been a week. Yes, sir. The food's been exceptional, better than exceptional. The men are happier than I've seen them in years. Productivity's up, morale's up. Even Sam is smiling, and that man hasn't smiled since the war. Danny waited, hardly breathing. So here's what I'm thinking, Brennan said. Forget the trial period. I want you and your siblings to stay. Permanently. All 5 of you. The words hit Danny like a physical blow. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Brennan smiled slightly. I'm also going to start paperwork to officially adopt Grace, Owen, and Ruby, the 3 youngest. They need legal protection, and I can provide that. Emma's more complicated because of her age, but I've spoken with Widow Harrison in town. She's agreed to be Emma's legal guardian on paper, though Emma will continue living and working here. And you, Danny, you're 13, old enough to work legally as a ranch hand. I'll pay you wages, train you proper, teach you everything I know about running this place. Danny found his voice. Why? Why would you do all this for us? Because my wife would have wanted me to, because my daughter would have wanted me to, and because maybe, just maybe, saving your family is the only way I can make peace with losing mine. Danny stood up, his legs shaking. Thank you, sir. I don't know what else to say except thank you. Don't thank me yet. This isn't charity. You'll work hard, harder than you've ever worked, and there will be rules, but you'll have a home. You'll have safety. You'll have a future. Brennan stood and extended his hand. What do you say, son? Danny took the offered hand and shook it, feeling calluses against his own strength, meeting strength. I say yes, sir. Yes to all of it. They shook on it, man and boy, rancher and orphan, 2 broken people, building something new from the ashes of what they'd lost. It wasn't the ending Danny had dreamed of. It was better. It was real. He ran back to tell his siblings, bursting through the door of their quarters with news that would change everything. Emma looked up from where she was teaching Grace to knead bread. Owen sat in the corner with a book Sam had given him. Ruby played with a rag doll one of the Cowboys had carved. We're staying, Danny said, and his voice cracked on the words. Permanent. He's adopting the little ones. We're staying. Emma dropped the dough. Grace screamed with joy. Owen's face split into the first smile Danny had seen in months. Ruby laughed because everyone else was laughing, too young to understand but old enough to feel the happiness in the air. They celebrated that night with a special dinner. Emma prepared the best meal she'd ever cooked. The Cowboys came and ate and toasted the family that had somehow become part of their own. Sam made a speech about how Stone Ridge had been dead for 7 years and was finally coming back to life. The men cheered, and Brennan, standing at the head of the table with a glass of whiskey in his hand, looked at the 5 children who'd stumbled into his life, broken and desperate, and somehow fixed something inside him he'd thought was beyond repair. To family, he said simply, the one you're born with and the one you choose. To family, everyone echoed. But even as they celebrated, even as happiness filled the ranch house for the first time in 7 years, danger was gathering in Willow Creek. Word had come that Deputy Miller had survived, but would never walk or speak again. His brain damaged beyond repair from the blow Emma's copper pot had delivered. Sheriff Hutchins had not forgotten, and Hutchins was not the kind of man who forgave or forgot. 2 weeks after the celebration, he came. It was midnight when the barn caught fire. Emma woke to screaming, to the smell of smoke, to the sound of men shouting and running. She threw on clothes and ran outside to see flames climbing into the night sky, consuming the barn, where the horses were kept, where hay was stored, where 7 years of work and investment burned. The ranch hands formed bucket brigades. They threw water that evaporated before it even reached the flames. Danny ran past carrying buckets until his arms felt like they'd fall off. Grace and Owen stayed inside with Ruby, all of them terrified. And Brennan stood at the center of it all, directing men making decisions. His face illuminated by fire in a way that made Emma's stomach clench because she knew this must be what it looked like the night his family died. Then she heard it, a sound that cut through the chaos like a knife through paper. A horse screaming in terror. Molly, Owen's horse. The gentle mare that had been the first thing to make Owen smile in months. She was still in her stall attached to the burning barn. Emma didn't think. She just ran toward the fire, toward the heat and smoke and danger. Behind her, she heard Sam yelling for her to stop, but she couldn't stop, wouldn't stop, because Owen loved that horse and losing Molly would break something in her little brother that might never heal. The heat hit her like a wall. Smoke filled her lungs, choking her, blinding her. She pulled her shirt over her nose and mouth and kept going, following the sound of Molly's terrified neighing. Found the stall. Fumbled with the latch. Her fingers were clumsy from smoke and fear, but finally the latch gave and the door swung open. Molly bolted past her, nearly trampling her in the rush to escape. Emma tried to follow, but her legs gave out. She collapsed to the ground, coughing, gasping for air that was all smoke and heat and death. The ceiling above her groaned. Beams started to fall. This is how I die, she thought, saving a horse. Mama would be so proud, or so angry, I'm not sure which. Then strong arms grabbed her, lifted her, carried her through flames that licked at her hair and clothes. Fresh air hit her face and she gasped, coughed, vomited smoke and fear onto the ground. Brennan set her down and then collapsed beside her, his jacket smoking. He'd run into a burning building to save her. Run into fire. For her. You stupid, stupid girl, he gasped. You could have died. Had to save Molly, Emma coughed out. Owen loves her. Owen can get another horse. I can't get another you. Emma looked up at Brennan and saw tears on his face, tracks through the soot and ash. He was crying. For her. This man who claimed to be dead inside was crying because he'd almost lost her. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't ever do that again. Don't ever. His voice broke. He pulled her against his chest, holding her tight. The fire. Kate was in the fire. Lily Ann was in the fire. I couldn't save them. I couldn't reach them. And when I saw you in there, all I could see was them. All I could feel was losing them all over again. But I'm here, Emma said. I'm okay. You saved me. This time. But next time. Won't be a next time. I promise. And they sat there in the dirt while the barn burned and men fought the fire. And Emma learned that sometimes the bravest thing isn't running toward danger. Sometimes it's letting people love you enough to pull you back from it. By dawn, the fire was out. The barn was gone, reduced to smoking rubble. But the house had been saved. The horses had escaped. Nobody had died. Sam found evidence in the ashes. A kerosene can, half empty. A note tucked under a rock near where the fire had started. Give up the children, or next time it's the house. No signature. Didn't need one. Brennan stood looking at the note, his face carved from stone. When he spoke, his voice was cold enough to freeze blood. Hutchins. Has to be, Sam agreed. Couldn't get you legal, so now he's trying to burn you out. Then I'll kill him, boss. I'll put a bullet between his eyes and sleep like a baby afterward. Danny stepped forward. No, sir. That's what he wants. You kill him, you hang. And then what happens to us? Brennan turned that cold stare on Danny. So what do you suggest? Wait for him to burn down the house with all of you inside? We fight smart, Danny said. We find proof. We go to the authorities. We do this legal. The law is Hutchins. The local law is Hutchins. But there's federal law too. Marshals. Judges who answer to Washington, not to corrupt sheriffs in Wyoming. Sam cleared his throat. The boy's right, boss. There's been rumors about Hutchins for years. Word is he's been taking orphans and placing them in mines and factories, taking payment for each child. If we could prove that. How do we prove it? Brennan demanded. Emma spoke up from where she sat, wrapped in a blanket. The orphanage. Mrs. Blackwood keeps records. Every child who comes through where they go, who pays for their replacement. If Hutchins has been doing this for years, there'll be proof in those records. Those records are locked in her office. Then we find someone who can get them, Danny said. Someone who works there, someone who's been suspicious. Sam nodded slowly. There's a woman, Rebecca, young nurse who volunteers at the orphanage. She's mentioned to me before that things don't add up, that children disappear without proper documentation. If we could convince her to help. Do it, Brennan said. Talk to her, get those records. And when we have proof, we take it to the federal marshal in Helena, and we bury Hutchins so deep he never sees daylight again. They made their plans carefully. Sam would approach Rebecca, would explain the situation, would ask for her help. It would take time, maybe a week, maybe two. But they had to be patient, had to be careful. One wrong move and Hutchins would know, and then the children would disappear into a system designed to break them apart and use them up. Emma went back to cooking, though her hands shook every time she touched the copper pot. The barn raising started, cowboys and neighbors coming together to rebuild what fire had destroyed. Danny worked alongside them, learning the rhythm of construction, the satisfaction of building something with your own hands. And in the evenings, Brennan would sit on the porch with his adopted family gathering around him. Grace would sing. Owen would read aloud, his voice soft but present. Ruby would climb into Brennan's lap and demand stories. Emma and Danny would sit on the steps and watch the sunset over Wyoming and think about how far they'd come and how much further they still had to go. On the 10th day after the fire, Rebecca came to the ranch. She brought with her a thick folder of papers, records she'd copied from Mrs. Blackwood's office at great personal risk. Her hands shook as she gave them to Brennan. 63 children, she said, over 10 years, most sent to mines in Montana, factories in Pennsylvania, cotton farms in Alabama, and every single transfer signed by Sheriff Wade Hutchins. Brennan opened the folder and read. His face grew darker with each page. These children, they were sold. Like livestock, Rebecca confirmed, 50 to 150 per child depending on age and health. Mrs. Blackwood and Sheriff Hutchins split the payment. And nobody questioned this. Who would question the law? Rebecca's voice was bitter. Hutchins has been sheriff for 15 years. He has judges in his pocket, deputies who follow his orders without question. The orphanage is licensed by the state. On paper, everything looks legitimate. Emma looked at the records and felt sick. 63 children, 63 lives destroyed. She and her siblings would have been numbers 64 through 68 if they hadn't run. What do we do with this? Danny asked. We take it to the federal marshal, Brennan said. There's one staying at the Silver Star Inn doing some kind of inspection of ranches in the area. William Thornton, I met him once years back. Good man, honest. This is exactly the kind of corruption he's supposed to root out. The inn is 5 miles from here, Sam said. If we ride out, Hutchins will know something's up. He's been watching the ranch. Then we send someone he won't suspect, Brennan said. He looked at Emma. Someone he thinks is just a child, just a cook, someone he'd never imagined could bring him down. Emma's blood went cold. You want me to go? I want you to have a choice. This is dangerous. If Hutchins catches you with those records, there's no telling what he'd do. But you're also the only one who could slip past his watching. Danny stood up fast. No, absolutely not. I'll go. Hutchins knows your face. He's looking for you specifically. But Emma, Brennan looked at her gently. He thinks you're just the sister, the one who cooked, not a threat. She's 11 years old, Danny said. You can't ask her to. I can do it. Emma's voice came out stronger than she felt. I can ride to the inn. Give the marshal the records. Come back. It's 5 miles, 2 hours if I ride fast. Emma, Danny, listen to me. For 3 months, you protected all of us. You fought for us. You got us here. Now let me do this. Let me protect the family for once. Brennan knelt in front of Emma. If you do this, you follow my rules. You take Midnight, our fastest horse. You stay off the main roads. If you see anyone at all, you run. You don't stop. You don't explain. You just run. And if something goes wrong, if Hutchins catches you, you tell him it was my idea. You blame me. Understood? Yes, sir. Emma, Brennan's voice cracked slightly. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Because there are 15 children scheduled to be transferred next Monday. 15 more kids who will end up in mines and factories and hell on earth if we do not stop this now. I can't cook away that kind of evil. But maybe I can ride away from it fast enough to bring back help. She left at midnight, dressed in Danny's clothes, the records tucked inside her shirt against her heart. Brennan helped her on to Midnight and held the reins for a moment, looking up at her. Ride fast, ride safe. Come home to us. I will. Emma. Yes, sir. I love you. Like my daughter. You know that, right? Emma felt tears burn her eyes but blinked them back. I know. And I love you too. Like a father. She rode into the darkness carrying records that would save 63 children, or damn 5, depending on whether she made it to the Silver Star Inn before Hutchins figured out what she was doing. Behind her, Stone Ridge Ranch held its breath. Ahead lay 5 miles of Wyoming night and one girl's desperate ride to save her family and a whole lot of children she'd never met, but who deserved better than being sold for $50 apiece. The copper pot hung in the kitchen, clean now waiting. And somewhere in Willow Creek, Sheriff Hutchins slept without knowing that his entire corrupt empire was about to come crashing down, brought low by an 11-year-old girl with her mother's copper pot and her own iron will. But that part of the story was still being written. Tonight was just about riding, just about surviving, just about making it through darkness to bring back light. The night swallowed Emma whole. She rode hard through darkness so complete it felt like being blind, trusting Midnight to find the path while she focused on staying in the saddle and keeping the records pressed safe against her heart. The horse was fast, just as Brennan had promised, eating up ground with powerful strides that made the wind tear at Emma's face and steal her breath. Behind her, Stone Ridge Ranch disappeared into blackness. Ahead lay 5 miles of wilderness and the slim hope that she'd reach the Silver Star Inn before anyone realized what she was carrying. The first hour passed in a blur of motion and terror. Emma followed back trails like Brennan had instructed, staying off the main road where Hutchins might have men watching. The moon gave barely enough light to see by, just enough to make out the shapes of trees and rocks and the narrow path winding through them. Her hands ached from gripping the reins. Her legs burned from holding tight to Midnight's sides. But she didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. Not with 63 children's lives tucked against her ribs and her own family's safety, depending on whether she could deliver them to someone who cared about justice more than power. She was 2 miles in when she heard it. Hoofbeats behind her, faint but unmistakable. Someone was following. Someone was chasing. Emma's heart jumped into her throat. She urged Midnight faster, leaning low over the horse's neck, whispering prayers and pleas into the animal's ear. Midnight responded, finding reserves of speed Emma hadn't known existed. Trees whipped past in dark blurs. The trail twisted and turned, dropped into gullies and climbed steep banks. Emma held on with everything she had, her whole world narrowing to the sound of hooves and breath and the pounding of her own terrified heart. The hoofbeats behind her grew louder, closer. She risked a glance back and saw torches, 3 or 4 of them bobbing through the darkness like angry fireflies. Men shouting to each other, voices carrying on the night air. There I see someone riding. Emma bent lower, trying to make herself smaller, less visible. Midnight's breathing came harsh and labored now. The horse had been running flat out for an hour and couldn't maintain this pace forever. Emma could feel the animal starting to tire the stride, shortening the power fading. "Come on, girl," Emma whispered. "Just a little further. Please, just a little further." A gunshot cracked the air. The bullet struck a tree to Emma's left bark exploding. She screamed despite herself, terror overriding training. Behind her, the men whooped and hollered like they were hunting rabbits instead of a child. Another gunshot. This one closer, close enough that Emma heard the bullet whine past her ear. Midnight stumbled, not hit, but startled, and Emma nearly lost her seat. She grabbed mane with one hand, records with the other, and somehow stayed on as the horse recovered and kept running. But it was no use. Midnight was done. The horse's sides heaved, foam flecking her mouth. Emma could feel the animal's strength, giving out muscles quivering with exhaustion. They'd run too far, too fast, and there was nothing left. Emma made a decision born of desperation and necessity. She pulled Midnight to a stop, jumped off, and slapped the horse hard on the rump. "Go run!" Midnight bolted, disappearing into the darkness without a rider. The men behind her shouted in confusion. Emma didn't wait to hear what they said. She grabbed the records, tight tucked them inside her shirt, and ran into the forest on foot. Running on horseback was one thing. Running through dense forest and pitch darkness was something else entirely. Emma crashed through underbrush branches, whipping her face and arms roots, trying to trip her with every step. Her ankle twisted on uneven ground, but she kept going, biting back the cry of pain. Behind her, she heard the men dismounting, heard them crashing through the same undergrowth, spreading out to search. "She's on foot, find her." Emma ran until her lungs felt like they'd burst, ran until her legs threatened to give out, ran until she couldn't run anymore, and had to stop pressing herself against a thick tree trunk, trying to quiet her ragged breathing. The men were still coming slower now, more methodical. They had torches. She had darkness. But darkness only helped if you knew how to use it, and Emma was lost, turned around, no longer sure which direction was forward and which was back. A ravine opened up in front of her without warning. Emma's foot found air instead of ground, and she tumbled, rolling down a steep slope, rocks and branches tearing at her clothes and skin. She hit the bottom hard, all the air knocked from her lungs, pain exploding through her left ankle where it twisted beneath her. For a moment, she just lay there, stunned and hurting, staring up at a sky she couldn't see through the canopy of trees. Then survival instinct kicked in, and she scrambled on hands and knees into a hollow beneath an overhanging rock, pressing herself as far back as she could go. Voices above her, torchlight flickering at the ravine's edge. "She went down there. I heard her fall. It's too dark. We'll break our necks to trying to climb down in this light. Boss is going to kill us if we don't find her. Boss doesn't know what he doesn't know. We tell him we chased someone off the property, lost them in the dark. Could have been anyone, a drifter, a thief. We don't mention the girl and he won't ask. What if she makes it to wherever she was going? Then we deal with it when it happens. Come on, let's get back before someone notices we're gone." The torches retreated. Footsteps faded. Emma waited in her hollow, barely breathing, counting to 100, and then counting again before she dared to move. When she finally crawled out, her whole body was shaking. Her ankle screamed when she put weight on it. But she was alive. She still had the records, and she still had 3 miles to go. Emma climbed out of the ravine inch by painful inch, using rocks and roots to pull herself up. By the time she reached the top, her hands were bleeding, and her ankle had swollen to twice its normal size inside her boot. She tried to walk and nearly screamed from the pain. Tried to run and managed maybe 3 steps before collapsing. 3 miles. She had to cover 3 miles on a sprained ankle in complete darkness, with Hutchins' men potentially still searching. It was impossible. It couldn't be done. But Emma thought of Ruby lying sick with pneumonia, of Grace's frightened face, of Owen's silence, of Danny's fierce protectiveness, of Brennan holding her after pulling her from the fire. She thought of 63 children in mines and factories working themselves to death because no one had cared enough to stop the man selling them. And she got up. She walked. Step by agonizing step, she walked. When walking became impossible, she crawled. When crawling became impossible, she rested for 5 minutes and then got up and walked again. The night stretched on forever, each minute an hour, each hour an eternity. But Emma kept moving because stopping meant failing, and failing meant losing everything that mattered. Dawn was breaking when she finally saw the Silver Star Inn ahead. It rose out of the gray morning light like a vision, 2 stories of whitewashed wood with smoke rising from chimneys. Emma stumbled toward it, her vision swimming, her ankle a constant scream of pain. She made it to the front steps and collapsed, unable to climb them, unable to do anything but lie there breathing and trying not to pass out. The door opened. A man stepped out, middle-aged and well-dressed, probably the innkeeper. He saw Emma and his face went white. "Good God, Margaret, call the doctor. There's a child collapsed on our porch." Hands lifted Emma. Voices spoke to her, but the words didn't make sense, just sounds washing over her like water. She was carried inside, placed on something soft. Someone tried to take the records from her shirt, and she fought, clinging to them with bloody fingers. "No, Marshal Thornton, I need Marshal Thornton. The marshal isn't receiving visitors." "Tell him," Emma's voice cracked raw from running and fear and exhaustion. "Tell him I have evidence of child trafficking. Tell him Sheriff Wade Hutchins has been selling orphans for 10 years. Tell him if he doesn't see me right now, 63 children are already lost and 15 more will be gone by Monday." The innkeeper stared at her. Then he ran up the stairs, shouting for the marshal. 5 minutes later, a man appeared. Silver hair, sharp blue eyes, weathered face that had seen too much and judged it all. He looked at Emma with the careful attention of someone who knew how to separate truth from lies just by watching. "I'm Marshal William Thornton. Who are you?" "Emma Sullivan, sir." She held out the records with shaking hands. "These are from the Helena Orphan Asylum. They show every child that's passed through in the last 10 years. Where they went, who paid for their placement, and Sheriff Hutchins' signature on every single transfer." Thornton took the papers, started reading. His face went from curious to concerned to absolutely furious in the space of 3 pages. When he looked up, his eyes were hard as stone. "Where did you get these?" "A nurse at the orphanage. She's been suspicious 4 years but couldn't prove anything. Now we can. Now you can." Emma tried to sit up and gasped at the pain. "Please, sir, there are 15 children scheduled to be transferred Monday morning. If you don't stop this now, they'll disappear just like all the others. And you rode here in the middle of the night to bring me this evidence." "Yes, sir." "Alone?" "Yes, sir." "You're what, 10 years old?" "11, sir. And I would have come if I was 6 because someone has to stop him. Someone has to care about those children enough to do something." Thornton studied her for a long moment. Then he stood and shouted for his deputies. 4 men appeared, all wearing federal badges, all looking alert and ready. "Saddle horses. We ride for Willow Creek immediately." "Sir, what about the girl?" one deputy asked. "Get her medical attention, clean her up, feed her, then we take her with us." "Sir, she's in no condition." "Those are my orders." Emma tried to protest, but the world was starting to spin. Someone pressed a cup of water to her lips, and she drank, tasting heaven. A woman appeared kind-faced and efficient and began cleaning Emma's cuts while murmuring soft reassurances. A doctor came and examined her ankle, wrapping it tight and giving her something for the pain that made everything go fuzzy at the edges. She slept then, not meaning to, unable to help it. When she woke, the sun was high and she was in a clean bed wearing clean clothes with her ankle properly bandaged. The woman from before sat in a chair nearby knitting. "How long was I asleep?" "About 4 hours, dear. The marshal said to let you rest. Your body needed it after what you went through." 4 hours. Emma struggled to sit up, panic clawing at her. "I have to get back. My family will be worried. They'll think I'm dead or captured or—" The marshal sent word. "A rider went to Stone Ridge Ranch at dawn to tell them you'd made it safely and were resting." Emma sagged with relief. Then another thought struck her. "The records. Where are the records?" "The marshal has them. He and his deputies have been studying them all morning. I heard him say it's the most damning evidence of corruption he's seen in 20 years. The woman set down her knitting. "You're a brave girl, very brave, and very foolish. You could have been killed." "I know, but I wasn't. And now those children have a chance." The woman smiled sadly. "Children shouldn't have to be that brave. Shouldn't have to risk their lives to save other children. That's supposed to be an adult's job." Adults were the ones doing the selling. Seemed like children were the only ones who cared enough to stop it. Marshal Thornton appeared in the doorway. "She's awake. Good. We ride in 15 minutes. Can you sit a horse?" "Yes, sir," Emma lied. The truth was she wasn't sure she could stand, much less ride, but she'd gotten this far. She'd finish it. They rode out with Emma on the gentlest horse in the marshal's stable, her ankle throbbing despite the medicine. Thornton and his 6 deputies surrounded her, all of them armed and looking like they expected trouble. The 5 miles back to Stone Ridge felt longer than the 5 miles there had been. Every step jarred Emma's ankle. Every minute she worried about what they'd find when they arrived. What they found was a standoff. They crested the hill overlooking Stone Ridge Ranch, and Emma's heart stopped. At least 10 men on horseback surrounded the ranch gate. She recognized several of them as Hutchins' deputies. And there at the front sat Sheriff Wade Hutchins himself, his face purple with rage, a rifle across his saddle. Inside the gate, Brennan stood with his own men spread out behind him, all armed. Danny was there too, holding a rifle that looked too big for his 13-year-old frame, but holding it steady nonetheless. Sam stood at Brennan's right, face grim. The other cowboys were positioned strategically around the yard. Hutchins was shouting, "Last chance, Brennan, hand over those children, and whatever evidence you think you have, and maybe I'll forget you've been harboring fugitives." "Go to hell, Hutchins. Then we're coming in, and if anyone dies, it's on you." Brennan raised his rifle. "First man through that gate eats lead." Emma kicked her horse, urging it faster despite the pain. Marshal Thornton matched her pace, his deputies spreading out to flank them. They thundered down the hill toward the ranch, and both sides turned to stare. Thornton's voice rang out like judgment itself. "Wade Hutchins, this is Federal Marshal William Thornton. You and your men are under arrest." Hutchins went white. "Thornton, what are you? Trafficking of minors, corruption of office, conspiracy, attempted arson. Shall I continue?" "You have no proof." Emma rode forward, pulling up beside Thornton. "Yes, he does." Hutchins saw her, and his face transformed from a white to purple. You little..." Brennan stepped forward, rifle coming up. "Finish that sentence and it'll be the last thing you ever say." "She assaulted my deputy," Hutchins was shouting, now losing control. "Left him brain damaged, and she's wanted for..." "She's under federal protection now," Thornton said calmly, "as are all the children at Stone Ridge Ranch. And as for evidence, we have records showing 63 children trafficked through the Helena Orphan Asylum over 10 years. Every single transfer authorized by you, every single payment documented, names, dates, amounts, all with your signature." Hutchins' hand moved toward his rifle. His deputies shifted nervously. For a moment, the whole world balanced on a knife's edge. Then Hutchins cracked. "Do you know how long it took me to build this?" Spittle flew from his mouth. "How much planning, how much work I was giving those children purpose structure. My daughter died because I couldn't provide for her, and I've spent 10 years making sure other children learned the value of hard work and discipline." "You were killing them," Emma said quietly. "Just like your daughter died. Over and over, killing children because you couldn't save the one that mattered." "I was saving them." "You were repeating your tragedy," Brennan said, "using other people's children to try to fix what broke in you. But that's not how healing works, Hutchins. That's just spreading your pain to people who didn't deserve it." Hutchins drew his rifle. Thornton's deputies moved instantly, 6 guns trained on the sheriff before he could even get the weapon shouldered. Hutchins froze, looking at the odds, at the federal badges, at his own deputies, who were slowly backing their horses away from him. "Put it down," Thornton said. "It's over. I'll be damned first." "You're already damned. The only question is whether you go to prison or to hell. Your choice." Hutchins looked around at his men, but they wouldn't meet his eyes. Looked at Brennan and saw only cold justice. Looked at Emma and saw the child he'd tried to sell, tried to burn out, tried to destroy, still standing, when his whole corrupt empire was falling apart. He lowered the rifle. Thornton's deputies moved in, surrounding Hutchins, pulling him from his horse, cuffing his hands behind his back. The sheriff didn't fight. All the rage had drained out of him, leaving just a broken old man who'd thought he was saving children and had been destroying them instead. As they led him away, Hutchins looked at Emma one last time. "You ruined me." Emma met his eyes steadily. "No, sir, you ruined yourself. I just made sure you couldn't ruin anyone else." They took Hutchins and 3 of his deputies into custody. The others scattered, suddenly remembering they had places to be that weren't here. Thornton stayed to take statements, to document everything, to make sure the case against Hutchins would be ironclad. Brennan crossed to where Emma sat on her horse, looking up at her with an expression she'd never seen on his face before, soft, vulnerable, terrified. "You should have come back hours ago." "I got delayed. I found midnight wandering without a rider. I thought..." His voice broke. "I thought Hutchins had caught you. I thought I'd lost you. But you didn't. I'm here." Brennan reached up and lifted Emma from her horse like she weighed nothing, pulled her against his chest, and held her like she was precious and fragile and worth saving. Emma wrapped her arms around his neck and finally let herself cry, all the fear and pain and exhaustion pouring out in great shaking sobs. "You did good," Brennan whispered into her hair. "You did so good, little one. Your mama would be so proud." Danny appeared, wrapped his arms around both of them, then Grace and Owen, and even little Ruby, until they were just a pile of people holding each other and refusing to let go. Sam and the Cowboys stood at a respectful distance, giving the family their moment. Marshal Thornton watched it all with something like satisfaction on his weathered face. You know, he said to Sam, I've been a lawman for 30 years, seen a lot of corruption brought down a lot of bad men, but I've never seen anything quite like this. An 11-year-old girl single-handedly dismantling a trafficking ring that's operated for a decade. That's Emma, Sam said with quiet pride. She's got more courage in her little finger than most men have in their whole body. And the rancher Brennan died 7 years ago when fire took his family. Those kids brought him back to life, gave him something to protect again, something to care about. Emma and her siblings saved him just as much as he saved them. Thornton nodded slowly. That's what family does, I suppose. Saves each other. The paperwork took 3 days. Thornton and his deputies arrested Mrs. Blackwood from the orphanage. Rebecca, the nurse who'd risked everything to bring them the records, was cleared of any wrongdoing and offered a position at a hospital in Helena. They tracked down the businesses and individuals who'd been purchasing children as labor. They began the long process of locating the 63 children who'd been trafficked, returning them to families when possible, finding proper homes when not. 15 children scheduled for transfer Monday morning were instead placed in legitimate care. They'd never know that a girl they'd never met had ridden through the night to save them, but they'd grow up free, and that was what mattered. During those 3 days, Emma rested. Her ankle healed. The cuts and bruises faded. She cooked for her family and Thornton's deputies, who declared her biscuits the best they'd ever tasted and tried to convince her to open a restaurant someday. She taught Grace more cooking skills. She watched Owen gain confidence, talking more every day. She held Ruby and sang the songs Mama used to sing. And she watched Brennan transform, saw him smile more, laugh occasionally, play with the children instead of just tolerating them. On the third evening, he called everyone together in the main house for an announcement. They gathered around the big table, among 5 children and Sam, and several of the senior ranch hands. Brennan stood at the head, looking nervous in a way Emma had never seen him look before. I have something to tell you all. He cleared his throat. Sarah Harrison and I are getting married. Silence. Then Grace shrieked with joy. Danny grinned. Owen clapped politely. Ruby demanded to be flower girl. And Emma felt tears spring to her eyes because this was it. This was Brennan finally letting himself love again, finally accepting that life could continue after loss. That new joy didn't erase old pain, but made it bearable. When Emma asked, Summer. We thought we'd wait until the new barn is finished until things settle down. Brennan looked at Emma specifically. Sarah wants you to help plan everything. Says a wedding needs a woman's touch, and you're the closest thing this ranch has to the lady of the house. I'm 11, and you've kept this family together through things that would break most adults. If anyone can plan a wedding, it's you. Sarah appeared from the kitchen where she'd been nervously waiting. She was a handsome woman in her mid-30s, strong and kind with laugh lines around her eyes. She crossed to Emma and took her hands. I know I'm not your mother. I would never try to replace her. But I hope we can be friends. Hope you'll let me be part of this family you've built. Emma looked at this woman who'd agreed to be her legal guardian on paper, who made Brennan smile like he'd forgotten how for 7 years. And she knew Mama would approve. We'd like that, all of us. The wedding took place in August on a perfect Wyoming day, with clouds like cotton and skies so blue it hurt to look at. Emma helped Sarah dress, fumbling with buttons and veil while trying not to cry and failing miserably. Grace sang as Sarah walked down the makeshift aisle. Owen stood beside Brennan as best man, solemn and proud. Ruby scattered flower petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Danny gave Sarah away, standing in for the father she'd lost years before. And Brennan, when he saw Sarah walking toward him, cried, just stood there with tears running down his face, not ashamed, not hiding, just openly grateful that life had given him a second chance at love when he'd thought his heart died in fire 7 years past. The whole county came to the celebration after. Cowboys and ranchers, townspeople and travelers, everyone who'd heard the story of the children who'd brought Stone Ridge Ranch back to life. They ate Emma's cooking and danced to Grace's singing and celebrated love that had survived loss and family that had survived betrayal. Late in the evening, Emma found herself on the porch with Danny watching stars come out over the ranch they now called home. 1 year, Danny said. Yamshi, 1 year since we showed up at that gate with nothing but desperation and Mama's copper pot. Seems like a lifetime ago. Seems like yesterday. Danny looked at his sister. You know what I think about sometimes? What would have happened if Brennan had said no, if he'd turned us away? Don't think about it. Can't help it. We were done him. That was the last chance. If he'd said no, we'd have died out there somewhere, frozen in winter or starved or caught by Hutchins. But he didn't say no, and we didn't die. We're here. Because you cooked like an angel, and I learned to rope cattle, and Owen touched Brennan's hand at exactly the right moment. We got so lucky, Em, so impossibly lucky. Emma shook her head. It wasn't luck. It was love. Mama's love that taught me to cook. Your love that got us here. Owen's love that cracked Brennan's walls. All of it was love, Danny. And love doesn't run out or disappear. It just keeps growing if you let it. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the party continue inside. Through the window, they could see Brennan dancing with Sarah, both of them laughing. Grace was teaching Ruby a new song. Owen sat with Sam, learning to play checkers. It was everything Mama had wanted for them. Family, safety, home. Emma's hand found the copper pot she'd brought out with her, unable to leave it inside even for one evening. She traced the dents and scratches, the bloodstain that had finally faded but never quite disappeared. Think Mama knows, she asked quietly. Think she can see us now. I think she knows, Danny said, and I think she's proud. Not just of you, though she should be. Proud of all of us. We did what she asked. We stayed together. We did more than that. We found family where there wasn't any. Built home from broken pieces. Saved children we'd never met because it was right. You saved them. You rode through the night and faced down Hutchins' men and delivered that evidence when anyone else would have given up. Emma smiled. Couldn't have done it without you. Without all of you. That's what family means, Danny. Not doing it alone. Doing it together. The door opened and Brennan stepped out, Sarah on his arm. They looked happy. Looked whole. Looked like two people who'd found each other in the ruins of their separate tragedies and built something beautiful from the wreckage. You two should come inside, Sarah said warmly. Grace is about to sing, and she specifically requested her big sister and brother be there to hear. We're coming? Emma stood copper pot in hand. Just needed a minute. Brennan's eyes fell on the pot. You keep that close. It's all I have left of Mama. Well, that and her recipes and her voice in my head telling me how to make biscuits. It's more than that now. Brennan crossed to Emma and took the pot, gently holding it up so lamplight caught the battered copper. It's a weapon that protected your family, a tool that saved 63 children, a symbol of everything you've overcome. He handed it back carefully. Your mama's legacy isn't just recipes, Emma. It's you, your courage, your strength, your absolutely stubborn refusal to let anything break your family apart. I learned from the best. Yes, Brennan agreed. You did, and someday when you have children of your own, you'll teach them the same lessons. How to cook with love, how to fight for family, how to turn copper and flour and determination into something that saves lives. He put his hand on her shoulder. Your mama would be so proud, and I'm proud to call you my daughter. Emma threw her arms around Brennan's waist, this man who'd been a stranger a year ago and was now the father she'd lost and found and chose. He held her tight, one hand on her head, and she felt Sarah's hand join Brennan's warm and gentle. Come on, Sarah said softly. Grace is waiting, and this is a celebration, not a time for tears. They went inside together, family by choice and by love. Grace's voice rose in song, pure and clear, filling the ranch house with music. Danny joined in after a moment, his voice cracking, but earnest. Owen hummed along, still learning, but trying. Ruby clapped off rhythm, delighted just to participate. Emma set the copper pot on the kitchen counter where it belonged and joined the singing. Her voice blended with her siblings, their harmony imperfect, but real family made visible through sound. Outside Wyoming, stars blazed in an endless sky. The ranch stretched peaceful under moonlight, cattle settling for the night, horses nickering soft in their stalls. Everything was still. Everything was safe. And in the main house, a family that had been broken and scattered and nearly destroyed sang together because they'd survived, because they'd won, because love had carried them through darkness into light. The copper pot sat on the counter clean now, except for one faint stain that would never quite come out. It had been weapon and symbol, had drawn blood and saved lives. But most importantly, it had been a reminder that some things matter more than survival. Some things are worth fighting for. Worth killing for if necessary. Worth riding through night and facing down evil and refusing to quit no matter how impossible the odds. Family was worth all that and more. Emma knew Mama was watching from somewhere beyond Wyoming stars. Knew she was smiling. Knew she was proud of the children who'd kept their promise, who'd stayed together through hell and high water and everything in between. They'd started with nothing but a copper pot and a promise. They'd ended with a home, a future, and a family that chose each other every single day. And sometimes that was the best kind of family there was. Inside the ranch house, the celebration continued. Outside, the night was peaceful. And somewhere in the space between five children who'd survived the impossible finally let themselves believe in happy endings. Not because endings were ever truly happy, but because happiness wasn't an ending. It was a choice you made every day to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep loving, even when the world tried to teach you that love was weakness. Emma had learned different. Love was strength. Love was survival. Love was the copper pot that protected you and the biscuits that fed you and the promise that bound you to the people who mattered most. And that lesson taught by a mother who died too young and learned by children who grew up too fast was worth more than all the gold in Wyoming. The stars shone, the music played, the family sang, and the copper pot waited in the kitchen for the next meal, the next crisis, the next moment when ordinary things would be called upon to do extraordinary work. Because that was what family did. Turn the ordinary into extraordinary. Turn copper into courage. Turn cooking into salvation. One meal at a time, one day at a time, one choice at a time. Together, always together,